What do these images have in common? Well, they're symbols we often encounter. They influence how we perceive the entities they represent and the world around us. Welcome back to the Stepwise YouTube channel. As part of our AI-based series on stepwise pedagogy, we focus on the Teacher Teaches section to design a grade 10 climate change science lesson. Students should have completed the Student Reflect phase already. Refer to our previous video for guidance on how to design this. This tutorial demonstrates using generative AI to design a one-class lesson on semiotics for grade 10 science students, covering both the input and student application segments. Semiotics is the study of how signs and symbols become representations of real-world phenomena. For students to understand STEMSE issues comprehensively, they need to be aware of the semiotics that impact their understanding of the entities around them, including both living and non-living entities. For example, when we are asked to think of a burger, we imagine a burger that is perfectly put together. However, the burger that we receive in real life is never really this perfect. The way in which we understand this symbol impacts what we think of when we think of the category of burgers. It is important to understand that many signs and symbols we rely on daily are created for a specific purpose, to generate a specific image, feeling, emotion, or thought in relation to the product, industry, or organization that we are thinking of. If we don't understand semiotics and the context from which these signs and symbols emerge, we see their existence as punctualized. This means that we view them very simply as existing independently, while in reality they are part of complex networks of many different living and non-living entities. In our example of the burger, we view it as just a burger, as just one item. However, this one item is a part of a network of other entities such as the cattle farms from where the meat comes, farming practices around the vegetables that are used, marketing strategies for this item, as well as the environmental impact that it tends to leave. Thus, an understanding of semiotics is crucial for a comprehensive understanding of how our world works. To begin our lesson, we can ask ChatGPT to create a slide set about semiotics for grade 10 science students that should begin with a minds-on activity that will help the students gain an introduction to the topic. When ChatGPT creates the slide set, it will include information like the minds-on activity, some information about semiotics, key concepts in semiotics, the types of signs, so on and so forth. However, because this prompt is very broad, it might include information that we don't necessarily need in the lesson, such as the types of signs. We can then continue the conversation with ChatGPT and ask it to remove this extra information on the types of signs. Through this lesson, our aim is to show students how semiotics shapes their understanding of the world. Using a real-world example of climate change will help them reflect on their perceptions and consider who defines the meanings of the signs and symbols related to climate change. The revised slide set also includes a minds-on activity that encourages meaningful reflections on these symbols. The slide set is meant to have images. However, ChatGPT as an AI model cannot access external sites to find images, but it can create custom illustrations for the images. We can ask it, for example, to create illustrations for our minds-on activity slide. Alternatively, if you would like to include real-life images for the slide set, you can use the AI model Gemini. For the prompt for Gemini, you can ask it to find images for the attached information and copy your slide set from ChatGPT into the prompt space. Gemini will then find the images for the text provided. Here are some examples of the real-life images it provides. In order to help our students think critically about semiotics, we can use the world sign map from Stepwise to help them understand how entities in the real world are translated into symbols. Using the diagram, we can show them that world phenomenon can be turned into signs and representations. We can also go in reverse to see how signs can be actualized into real-world phenomena and impact the world. The key here is to convey the idea that signs are naturally incomplete, as they will not be able to provide all the information that a real-world phenomenon can. To use this diagram, we can use examples to work our way from world phenomena to signs. We can use the chat function in ChatGPT and attach the diagram with a prompt. It generates descriptions of images that show a real world phenomena and how it can be symbolized in different ways. We can use the prompts for the image descriptions that it generates and put them into Gemini AI, which can find real images for us. It provides images, for example, such as melting glaciers and the signs for melting glaciers. It shows a map of melting glaciers, a virtual model of the phenomena, a symbol and icon of melting glaciers, as well as a mathematical representation for the data presented on this topic. To be mindful of problematic STEMSE relationships, we can ask ChatGPT to include images for world-assigned translations that are intentional mistranslations. Amongst a list of examples that it generates, it talks about how information can be presented in a way that miscommunicates it. It also gives an example of how scientific data can be misrepresented. Now that we have gathered enough information to teach the lesson on semiotics, we can include a section to have students practice what they have learned. We can ask ChatGPT the following prompt: that based on this, all the information that we have presented to it, if it can design an activity for students where they take a world phenomenon of their choice and show how it gets turned into a sign while recognizing what's lost and gained in the translation. ChatGPT creates an activity that asks students to create their own signs based on a world phenomenon that they choose, and it asks them to reflect on what's lost in each translation and how this may impact the viewer's perception of the specific sign or symbol. In this way, we can get the help of AI models like ChatGPT and Gemini to create content and activities for the Teacher Teaches section of stepwise pedagogy. Do remember that these models have conversational memory, so we can edit each prompt as needed to get our desired outcome. We hope you found this video helpful in designing a lesson on semiotics. Subscribe to the Stepwise YouTube channel to learn more about related topics like actor network theory, dispositives, and STEM SE maps.